thanks for inviting me to come and talk to you today. As John said, my name is Joseph Saunders and I work for the South West Coastal Monitoring Programme. I'm going to talk to you today about CoastSnap, which is a community science data collection project that we've been sort of rolling out since 2019 actually. And our first site is at Wembury, funnily enough, down on the beach. I hope you've all seen the site or know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it'll become clear, hopefully. Has anybody ever heard of who I work for? We were formerly known as Plymouth Coastal Observatory. It's nice to know who's I'm talking to in the room. A couple of nods, that's always good. But I'll give you a little introduction about what I do and where we work and that. So, yeah, South West Coastal Monitoring, we've recently had a rebrand, so if you've not heard of us, I wouldn't be surprised, but we were formerly known as Plymouth Coastal Observatory. So I'll give you a little introduction to what we do. Then I'll talk about CoastSnap and what it's all about and why we're using it as a sort of data collection tool and also as a community engagement tool. I'll then show you some pretty pictures from Wembury, a little bit of the data that we've sort of managed to gather from that, and then I'll just talk about the wider CoastSnap Southwest project that we're trying to roll out, have been rolling out over the last 4 years. So, the monitoring programme is one of 7 which cover the entire coast of England and Wales. So we form a national network, and the idea being that we all run things in a very similar fashion. So what we're doing here down in the southwest, all the way from the border of Wales, all the way down to Portland Bill, just looking at the coastal area, is mirrored all the way around the coast of England and Wales as well. They replicate what we do. And essentially our role is to collect, collate and analyse a wide variety of coastal data. We've been doing that since 2006, and those data range pretty widely. So we've got a pretty large hydrodynamic network around the coast. There's lots of wave buoys, tide gauges, met stations, all measuring away constantly, 24/7. So picking up bits of data from models, early warning systems, research papers, etc. We do topographic beach surveys. You might have seen us at some point down on the beach with our poles and our backpacks. We're collecting elevation of the beach, and so we do that once a year, every spring, and that's just keeping a long record of trying to picture how the beach is changing. And again, that's been running since 2006. We also do run LiDAR surveys. So LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging. It's effectively a plane will fly over, fire a laser down to the ground, and it gives you a 3D model of the elevation of the Earth, effectively, and that will run every 2 years in the coastal area. We also do bathymetry surveys, so LiDAR obviously captures everything on land, and bathymetry will capture everything underwater, and we normally do those surveys down to what we call a depth of closure. So everywhere that the sand will keep moving from waves or tidal or current action, we'll survey up to that sort of limit. So we're interested in the coastal fringe, everything that's influenced by hydrodynamics, meteorological impacts, anything on the coastal environment. We do habitat mapping, and we also do asset inspections, so an asset being coastal defence, the breakwater for example. There's a few assets down at Wembury Beach, and we'll inspect those if they're not already inspected by the Environment Agency. So why are we doing all of this? Before the programme existed, data was collected on coastal projects very ad hoc. It was normally done for a particular project or a scheme, and once that project was finished, like they built a new seawall, that data would be archived away and never see the light of day again. So the whole idea of the programmes are that we collect this data routinely in a standard and repeatable method so that they can be used across many different sort of branches. I should mention that it's all freely available as well, so anybody can access it, which is the major part of the programme. We're funded by DEFRA, but our major partners are the Environment Agency. So it's mostly in support of their flood and coastal erosion risk mapping or management systems. We also work very closely with local authorities. This is in developing any sort of schemes or projects that they have towards building a new sea defence, for example, managing the beach environment, whatever it might be. Other risk management authorities such as Network Rail or South West water companies. So anybody who has a stake in the coast will be using our data to inform their decisions, better inform their decisions. And possibly most importantly, from my perspective, is research as well. So all of the data, a lot of the papers coming out of Plymouth University in terms of their coastal systems team will be using the data that we collect as a national programme. So I'll just touch briefly on what that looks like for Wembury. This is just an aerial image of Wembury Beach, and overlaying on the top of that is what is called a difference model. So it's two data sets, one taken away from the other, and it shows the difference in elevation on the beach. Blue is accretion, red is erosion. So this is a difference model between the first survey we ever did in 2007 compared to the most recent full survey we did back in 2022. So you can see Wembury's doing quite well, if you like, in terms of the sand that it's got. It's only got a very thin veneer of sand, but that's mainly what we're interested in looking at, is that movement of material. So in comparison back to 2007, you've got a lot of accretion on that beach, which some of you might not agree with, but that's what the data is telling us. So this is LiDAR data. It's probably the most useful data that we have. It covers a really wide area, and it allows us to sort of compare different epochs in time. You'll notice that there's a line going down that difference model. That's the profile that we survey using topographic survey kits. So if you've seen us on the beach, we're wearing bright yellow jackets, got a yellow backpack on, and we're basically just taking points every 5 meters down a profile from what we call the back of the beach, where it's very stable, all the way down to mean level to spring, so a fixed rate. And this is what that topographic data looks like. So on the bottom here, you've got a timescale from the first survey back in 2007 to the most recent, which was done only a couple of days ago in this year. And on the y-axis here, you've got how that profile is changing in regards to how much material is within that sort of envelope. So again, if you compare it to 2007 and 2022, similarly to what the LiDAR was saying, you've got an accretion. But the most important thing to note from this is you've got a general accretion that happened all the way up to 2013-14. I imagine a lot of you will remember 2013-14 as the big storm year. And then since then, we saw quite a considerable amount of erosion, around a third of that sort of area that was lost, all the way down to 2016. And that continued on, and it's since been trying to recover in terms of its beach material. We're somewhere in the middle at the moment. So it's relatively stable, but it does fluctuate quite a bit in terms of the range that it's changing. So that's the topographic data. And then you've got aerial imagery. Picture speaks 1,000 words. It's quite difficult to obtain this sort of information. It's all captured from an aircraft, but it paints a nice picture and it feeds a bit more of the information that we're looking at, trying to get out of Wembury. But the main thing is it's staying relatively stable. If anything, you're getting a sort of reduced upper beach as time goes on. But if you look back in 2007, this one, these rocks are all exposed, which we've not seen since from our aerial imagery capture. So maybe 2007 was quite patchy. So this is all the data that, well, some of the data that we hold on Wembury, just a little snapshot. But the main thing is you can never have enough data. And we come and survey here once a year with our topographic kits. You might say that's not enough, you might say that's too much, depending on your interests. But we're doing this at 155 beaches around the southwest, so we have to spread our interests. But this is where CoastNap comes in. So CoastNap is very simply a fixed point photography station. It's a simple bit of kit, as you've seen on Wembury. It's a metal camera cradle stuck on a post with a sign telling you what to do. So beach users will hopefully come along, read the sign, pop their phone in, take a photo and send it through to us. And it's as simple as that. It should take less than 30 seconds if you're pretty nifty with your phone. It's very simple and affordable infrastructure. The whole thing costs less than £200 to install, and we hope that they're in place for a sort of a 10-year cycles. So once a CoastNap station is in place, effectively you'll get between a photo every day to every couple of days to every week maybe in the winter, depending on how busy it is. So what we're doing is building a really comprehensive image catalogue of how a beach is changing from the exact same perspective as much as possible. And that will feed into the way that we monitor the beach, because it gives you a snapshot in time of how that beach is reacting on a much, much shorter scale than what we are surveying. CoastNap's been around for quite a while. It started off in 2017. We didn't get involved until 2019, but it started in Australia, and since then it's sort of become a bit of a global phenomenon of ways to measure and record how a beach is changing. So these are all the sites that are currently active around the world. There's hundreds of them now on every continent apart from Antarctica, and they're approaching sort of 500,000 submissions of photos. So it's a huge data collection program. and we're sort of hopefully leading the charge a little bit in the southwest, but I'll come on to that in a minute. So it's a really useful data collection project for us, and we love it because it feeds into the sort of routine collection of data that we often do, but probably the most important aspect of it is it's a community-led project. We rely on members of the public like yourselves coming around, spotting it, taking a photo and submitting it. Without those photos, the project wouldn't work. But it's also given us an opportunity to work really closely with community groups such as these listed here, who are trying to engage with their local community as to how that beach or coastal environment is changing over time. But they are changing, and they will continue to change quite drastically into the next 20, 50, 100 years. So it's really trying to get across the message that this change is expected, but it's to manage how we're going to plan for it in the future. So yeah, it's secondly, most importantly, is a community engagement tool. So the Wembury Coast Staff project, like I said, it was our first one that we ever did. It was installed back in 2019 in collaboration with the National Trust and Churchwood Valley, I believe they're called, just over the way, whose land very kindly let us put a post up on their land, which is the hardest part actually about installing one of these, is getting permission from the landowner. And since then we've had, I think, around 1,200 photos submitted, so just under one every 3 days if you average it out. Much more in the summer obviously when it's more popular, and a lot less in the winter, but it's when it's most often changing, to be honest. And we've managed to capture some pretty interesting content. Now, what I'm going to show you I think is really interesting, but if you live here then you probably think this is everyday occurrence. But for us who, we come here once a year, maybe a couple more times, depending on how often the site is, it's really valuable information for building how that coastal environment is changing. So, for one, it's a very busy beach in the summer. There's a lot of artificial intelligence out there now that you can run some image recognition software on that, and it will tell you exactly how many people you've got in the photo. So we can start to piece together a little bit about how busy it gets in the summer, how busy it gets in the winter, when the popular times are. This is interesting information for the National Trust, who obviously want to manage the number of people that are visiting their sites, or get a reasonable idea of how many people are visiting their sites. We also came to realise that I think it's called the Wembury Stream, I'm not sure if it has another local name, but has quite a large influence on the upper beach formations that we get here. So here's just a picture of it after a flood. And what that can do is it can really sort of change the dynamics of that upper beach berm that you get forming when that upper sediment's sort of washed up. So it can cut away or change the shape of the beach quite considerably, something that we hadn't really contemplated before. And also realised that you can get quite a considerable amount of seaweed that gets deposited on the beach. So this was taken in August actually in 2020. August in 2020. So not what you might expect from a summer month to get a large deposit of seaweed. So it must have been quite an energetic event that's followed this. So we've had a look, and that it was actually what we consider a storm event for the nearest wave point, where it tipped over the storm threshold. Interesting for August. Now, seaweed might be seen as quite a pest on the beach, but it actually does act as quite an effective sea defence, if you'd like. It's material that's added to the beach. Not very useful in August, albeit, but you can track to see how quickly that material breaks down if you're interested in that. But we see it as more of an interest because there was quite a large, highly energetic event coming through in the middle of summer that caused all this to happen on the beach. We also realise it's quite a beautiful spot as well. So I've got hundreds of these, what I call candid photos, that I've saved in a folder somewhere, but this was quite a nice one. People tend to like taking photos at sunset, so yeah, you can use it as a nice photo cradle as well.
Sunrise.
Is that sunrise?
It says 10 to 7.
Yes, well that was why I think sunset. But for us, it gives us that sort of intricate detail about how the beach changes in time. So this was probably the most eroded photo I have of the beach. This was taken in March 2023, so not even that long ago, last year. And you can see that there's that outfall pipe that gets exposed every now and again. I think it was exposed in the 2007 imagery that I showed you before. And you've got all that upper beach material completely stripped and showing the underlying pebbles that are there. Again, it's a very thin veneer of sediment at Wembury, but it's still of interest to us when that is removed and returned. It seems to be quite cyclic. You've also got quite a considerable drop from the main entrance from the steps down onto the beach. So yeah, it gave us an idea that actually Wembury is quite an interchanging beach, considering it's what we call a pocket, relatively sheltered beach, which does get majorly southwesterly storms, but again it has the reef, it has the island, it has relevant elements of protection. So I just want to show you these 3 photos. This was taken on the 2nd of January 2022. Relatively healthy beach. I just want you to sort of focus on the sand levels here around the reef and along the bottom of the National Trust building. Apologies if you can't see it, but this was the next day. So you have all that sediment completely stripped away. I'll show you the difference of it, and that's like just over 24 hours difference. That was one relatively calm event actually. It wasn't a storm. And then the next day, less than 24 hours, it's all come back. So, it's an incredibly dynamic beach, and we hadn't really realised this or grasped that it would change that much significantly the space of a couple of days. And we're talking about tons and tons of sediment here shifting within the cycle of a couple of tides. So for us, Wembury's been quite successful. It's kick-started our CoastNap adventure, and it's also sort of fed into the way that we collect data and sort of piece together what happens at Wembury on a daily basis almost. So if you've only got that one topographic data point, then this is really sort of feeding a little bit more into what we're trying to look at and how we're going to manage it. The main interest for Wembury, of course, for us, as flood and coastal erosion risk managers, if you like, is the National Trust building. There's also the sea defence there that's protecting the sort of riverbank going along there. The last I heard is the National Trust building was going to be left to its own devices. That might have changed now, I'm not sure. Don't want to put my foot in it, but yeah, it's of interest to us because it's a coastal asset and they have, well, it's pretty much on the high tide mark. So yeah, we'll see how that develops in the next couple of years. So that was Wembury, and once we'd installed Wembury back in 2019, it soon became quite successful. We had lots of photos coming through. It soon caught the eye of the Environment Agency, and they were able to sort of give us a bit of funding to kickstart the project, as it were, around the southwest. So we've now got 26 of these sites installed, which is an awful amount. It's a lot of photos. That's close enough to 20,000 photos that we've got now. So it's an incredible amount of data, almost too much for me to wade through on my own, but the idea is that we want other people to start looking into it themselves. And these aren't just random sites that have been chosen around the coast. They've all got intricate little problems, issues, things that want to be monitored that are going on at them. So whether that be a pebble ridge that's moving, or a dune system that's retreating, or a critical bit of infrastructure that is being affected. So if anybody's ever been to Slapton, it's looking along the Tor Cross end, how that beach sort of moves around. It's looking at Porthmuir, if you've ever been there in St Ives, and how that sediment changes throughout the year. Every single site's got a slightly different problem going on. And these images that are submitted on a near daily basis are really sort of promoting that fact and what we're trying to prove. And yeah, we've engaged with sort of 50 community groups, so like yourselves, trying to spread the word, pointing people in the direction of a bit more information as to what they might want to read about for their local or visiting beach. They're all changing in very different ways. They will all be changing into the future. So it's really raising awareness of the fact that climate change is coming. We're trying to record how that's happening and manage it in the best way possible. So yeah, that's the CoastNap project as a whole, and we want it to be as open and to everyone as possible. Everything that we collect is freely available, like I said. So what we're really pushing for now is, once all of these photos start coming in from these 26 sites, is we want to make them as available as possible to anybody to use them. So our national website, which I can happy to share with you later, so this is where you get any of the data that I previously mentioned. We'll hopefully at one point host a gallery for CoastNap, so you can filter through all those different sites and have a look at the photos, and if you want to do any analysis yourselves, you can have a look. But yeah, that will contain user guides and a bit of metadata and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that is pretty much everything. I did promise a time lapse. So this is Wembury running through from early 2020 to 2022, I think. Pretty much nearly every day, which is, yeah, it's always interesting having a look at the time lapses. The most difficult part about them is trying to align them so that it looks like it's coming from the same perspective, because everybody has a different phone, so it looks like that. But yeah, that's me. Any questions I can help with?
Joseph, when you put the time lapse together,
Yeah.
does each picture get the same amount of time, or do you attempt to match it to a real-time line? So if you've only got 3 pictures in a week, does each picture get slightly longer than if you had 7 pictures in a week?
Oh, I see. No, everyone gets the equal amount of representation. Yeah. So these are flicking through. It's just basically everything in chronological order. But there might be a week's gap. There might be a half a day's gap between each one. Yeah, this was all done in Photoshop. So yeah. It's my main weapon, if you like, for processing all the imagery.
You'll understand why I asked the question.
Okay.
Are you monitoring every part of the southwest coast with your LiDAR sort of type of stuff?
So LiDAR, the beauty of LiDAR is it captures the whole coastline. So LiDAR is one of the most useful data sets because it's flown for that whole band around the coastal fringe. But in terms of what we call highly sort of intricate detail, we're looking at very particular locations, so 150 odd around the southwest.
Just to be represented, I mean, because you can't look at everything, so you've got to choose something.
Yeah, we're restricted by the same budgeting as the Environment Agency, so we have to pinpoint our interests on effectively areas that have got lots of infrastructure, so or critical infrastructure or properties that are protected by it, as terms of those main beaches go. So Wembury is pretty much the National Trust buildings and the car park there. So yeah.
And I noticed from some walks recently, just going a bit further around to Wembury Point, you've got the cliffs have been quite significantly falling away.
Yeah, it's all not glacial till. It's all till there. It's all very fine.
Very soft.
Yeah. But there's nothing behind it in terms of what we're interested in.
The coast path, but nothing
No,
much else.
Yeah. So no critical infrastructure essentially, which is where the sort of the funding is concentrated, if you like. Yeah, and if it's an MOD structure, then we don't mess with that either.
Would something like the coast have to be considered critical infrastructure that fell away, and therefore the coast came right to the farmland? Would they reinstall the coast path?
I think that would be down to the South West Coast Path institution. I know that they are facing a losing battle essentially because the coast is retreating consistently, not consistently, continuously over time. They'll always try and replace it, I would imagine, move it further back, but landowners can be tricky. Like I said, it's the most difficult bit.
The Coastal Access, the Marine Act the Marine and Coastal Access Act that came out 10 years ago actually says that there should be access, something that might be 10 metres from the coastline. What I don't remember it saying is how you actually go about basically taking the farmer's land off him. And every time I walk down there at the moment and see another bit of cliff going and think, some point that path has got to go in because the Coastal Access Act says that it should. And how does that work? I don't know. But it's certainly, I don't think the farmer's got any right to say no, you can't move the path because the coast has moved. It's well established in the Act. I don't know whether really thought it through.
I know that's certainly not the case in my hometown in Wales because you have to pay the farmer to go through his land, so I don't know if it's slightly different there.
Well, that's interesting because I first started doing some coastal walking in Wales. I was on a sailing trip there, and there are all these Fox for Oscar signs all over the place. And then this Act came out.
Oh right, okay. Maybe it's changed since.
Wow, That must have changed things in Wales a bit.
Essentially.
Maybe it has, but people haven't really caught up with it.
Yeah, I must admit it's been a while since I walked that segment, but he tries to funnel you through his little wildlife sanctuary that he's built around one of the islands. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, that was
Grand.
fascinating. But what are the main factors on how much and where the sand is at Wembury? Presumably it's how rough it is. And also the angle of the swell coming in, does that have a big...
Yeah, I mean, I've never actually done an over amount of analysis on the wave action coming in at Wembury. It's predominantly southwest, we know that. It tends to be when you get those particularly high energy storms that you'll have a stripping of the upper sediment up the top of Wembury. But as you've seen from the topographic data there and the coastline images, it does come back eventually. So the bit that we're really interested in is you'll have the cutting back, if you like, of the very upper beach section where the path runs at the moment as it goes towards the coast snap site. Not sure how long the coast snap site's going to last, might fall in at some point as well. It's the nature of having something on the coast. But yeah, it is majorly influenced by the high energy storms that you get coming in.
So they tend to strip it away and then it comes back as it, when it's calm, it gradually...
Yeah, so what you'll see is
Tracking.
in those really big storm events, it'll strip the sediment and it'll deposit it offshore. It won't go anywhere, it'll just be pushed offshore.
And it doesn't go far
No, it doesn't go far.
at
in
all,
the grand
just on
scheme of
those
things.
offshore reefs.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in, and you
But when-
see the sand
Yeah, but there will
coming
be
up the
will
bottom of the
grow.
reefs.
Better surf for some people, you never know. But what you will see is if it's a really big storm like you had in 2013-14, that sediment will be stripped and pushed so far back that actually you'll need another big storm to come in to mobilise that sediment that's gone so far offshore that it will need to be pushed back in. If that makes sense.
Right.
So it is stepped out as far as that's as big as those waves that are coming in will take it, and then following that it will be pushed back in by potentially another storm that comes along. So it still needs to be mobilised, but yeah, generally you get accretive conditions in calmer weather generally. So that's why you see it's depleted in the winter and accreted in the summer.
Yeah.
Apart from in that photo in August. So, yeah. Right, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to stay? I mean, you're very welcome to
I
stay.
will hang about for a little bit. Yeah, no problem. Be
Right.
interesting.
Other citizen science projects. Citizen science is a sort of relatively new beast and only arrived in the Oxford English Dictionary in 2014. But going back a little older than that, this is one of the granddaddies of the citizen science projects in the marine world, Sea Search. Warning, it's going to get slightly confusing because a lot of these projects have very similar titles. In fact, some of them even have the same title, just to confuse things even further. So Sea Search, Bob Earl, who runs the Southwest Marine Ecosystem Conference, and Coastal Futures National Bash up in London, set this up back in the 1980s, and it's now led by the Marine Conservation Society, and they've got quite a network of support that goes into ensuring that the data is good. And these days it uses volunteer divers and snorkelers who get 3 levels of training. So that picture in the background is taken from my first Sea Search dive back in about something like 2011. No, it was earlier than that, 2011 I did my surveyor's course. And my underwater photography really was very good then. But, you know, those are netted dog whelps, so they went down and forward. And so the 3 levels is the observer level, which is the really basic one. It's a 1-day course, and you have to keep on submitting the forms. It gets processed and goes onto the national database. Once you've been doing that for a while, you get to be go to the surveyor level. That was the one I did in 2011. That's actually me, Sally Sharrock, who was the local Sea Search coordinator at the time, was sort of checking me out on that, and we found a cuttlefish.
I was going to say, I thought that was a couple of fish.
There's a cuttlefish. First one I've ever seen underwater. Pretty awesome. I really enjoyed that. But shortly after that, I stepped back from it because I did something horrible to my back in a rib at the end of a dive, and never completed my surveyor dive. So I'm still just an observer. But in order to practice this, I used to go snorkeling. Oh, sorry, but before we then there's a specialist level, which is for gods. And that rock there, if any of you walked a bit out towards Wembury Point and know what I mean by the sandy lagoon, we call it the sandy lagoon because it's a lagoon, it's seabed's all sand. But smack in the middle of it is this rock, which at very, very low water is high and dry, but even at low water, usually it's just up to the top. So I'd go down there and practice my sea search forms with snorkeling and said, is this any good? And, well, we don't know about snorkeling really, but you practice it, so we put them in. And in the end, they got so fed up with the forms, they said, just send us the spreadsheet. We trust you now with the wildlife on there. It was really quite interesting for a couple of years just to see how much things changed on that one single rock. But since then they've had a change of heart, and snorkelers are now really welcomed into sea search. There is even sea search for snorkelers courses, which is pretty good really. One of the other things they do to ensure that the data is good is they produce this set of guidebooks, which are lavishly illustrated with really first-class photographs that they get from sea searchers, which is nice because it's quite a bit of an ego boost to get money. Well, you probably don't get much of an ego boost from it because you've got lots, haven't you?
It's nice to see.
It is. I mean, I've got one in sponges, one in seaweeds, and one in fishes. So I'm quite chuffed with that. And actually, the really nice thing about it is you get a free copy as well. And now that they're produced by who's the new publisher of it? Princetown, which is a big international publisher. And so once you've got your free copy from Princetown, they say, do you want our emails? Yeah, I'll have your emails. And they send you these fantastic offers on books that they've just published. So the new nudibranchs of Northeast Atlantic came out, 25 quid or something, 50% off if you're already on the Princetown books. So that was good. It's slightly complicated because as Charlotte, the national coordinator, says, if you ask everybody for everybody's pictures, it becomes an impossible thing. So they watch sea searchers on Facebook, and if they're starting to put some nice pictures up and they're going to put out a new book, say they're going to put out the Sea Searcher's Guide to Jellyfish, then they'll look at people with pictures up on Facebook and say, can we have one of your pictures of jellyfish? Oh, I don't know if anyone uses these things, the QR codes, right term? First time I've ever put them on one instead of putting on web addresses. So if you want to whip your phones out and get the link, do. But I'm too old for that. And actually, I did try them and they did work. So that's sea search. What happens to all this data is it goes into the National Biodiversity Network database, and then it's used for making decisions. And sea search data was used when they were putting together the network of marine coastal, the maritime MCZs, marine conservation zones, under the Marine Act, which was quite nice. Shore search, just to confuse things. This used to be Sure Thing, which was developed up in Newcastle some years ago, rolled out as a national campaign. We, the Wembury Marine Conservation Area Advisory Group, used to run a Sure Thing survey every year, did it for about 5 years. And the protocols are pretty similar, which means that the data that was collected under Sure Thing can be compared with the data from shore search, and you've got a continuity of data, which is quite good. It's now been adopted by the wildlife trusts, and so it's still being going around nationally, and it's a survey of the intertidal. And so there's 4 different surveys that you can do. There's the walkover one, which is this one, which is the rather more fun one. You get to just walk around and find stuff and record everything you see, which is lots of fun. On there's the timed search. That's particularly looking out for invasive non-natives. You get a card with a picture and description of a particular thing you're looking for. You have 20 minutes and you walk around the area, see if you can find it. And the answer is either yes or no. This one is on sandy, muddy beaches. I've never done one. It looks very boring. Sandy and muddy beaches, they're better than no beaches at all, aren't they? And then there's the transect survey, where you take a line directly down the beach, and you do a series of these little boxes and count everything in them at the top of the shore, middle of the shore, and right at the bottom of the shore. It's really quite hard work, but it really does give you some quite good data. And those are the things that we've been doing in Wembury. Lots of people doing it, lots of volunteers. And if you look on the Marine Centre website, you can see on the programme there, and you can sign up for them on Eventbrite, and they're free. And they tell us about changing distributions. So there's this appearance crab, which reappeared in Cornwall about 7 years ago, 10 years ago, and then reappeared here about 3 years after that. First report was actually from Wembury, that spread into Devon. Stingwinkle, that's a sort of sea squirt that lives in the intertidal and has a lung or something, isn't it? I've forgotten its
Which
name.
is sea slug?
The one on the right. It's
I thought that was a sea slug. Sea slug with the head tentacles.
yeah, isn't it this one that sort of breathes air though?
I don't know.
No, I went looking for one once with an expert in North Devon who we'd never actually met up, because he put his camera down and the waves had washed it away, and he'd gone to try and get it and fallen in the sea and gone home, which was fair enough. Climate change indicators, a number of species there which are indicative of the way things are changing as things are warming up. And invasive non-native species. So you've got Portuguese oysters and codium, sort of seaweed, and that's the sort of sea mat. And that's a sea squirt, the leathery sea squirt, which came across during the Korean War, when the navies of the free world were swanning around in the Pacific, and came back to their home ports with these things hanging off their hulls, and then from the naval ports they spread to the civilian ports, and from the civilian ports they spread to the marinas, and now they're everywhere. And an orange-tipped sea squirt, harpoon weed, that red stuff that you see on the beach, and it sticks to wetsuits like Velcro. Amazing stuff. It's horrible. And that's another picture of the water cypora, something or other. And devil's tongueweed, a really bright red stuff. I don't think we've actually found any of that. Have you heard of any of that being found here? No. You find it in marinas. And it's quite interesting because it's slippery. Well, you know, there's a surprise, seaweed slippery. But it doesn't come off on your fingers. So you feel it and it's all slippery, you feel your fingers and they're not slippery. So how does it do that? Apparently there are scientists that are working on that as doing sort of biomimetics, because if you can lubricate something without it losing its lubrication, then you gain something there, haven't you? These are coral slides, and I'm not quite sure what that seaweed is. Do you know what that seaweed is, Paul?
No, it's not an animal, John.
So in 2023 we did 19 surveys, recorded about 200 species, and submitted 962 records. So we'll get onto records in a second. Then there's Sea Watch Saturday. So first Saturday of every month we run a dolphin watching bash over at Wembury Point, led by Paul Burley, who's that one there, very experienced dolphin watcher. I actually live at Wembury Point, so I'm meeting quite often as I walk with the dog first thing in the morning, and we chat about his dolphins as he goes down to the point to watch them. So he'll tell you about dolphins, and then you spend a happy morning on a day like that watching dolphins. We did actually see some, about 3. But I mean, he's seen hundreds, and tuna as well. And so we talked earlier about the fact that all this data gets into the national database, and it goes in and is available through iRecord and iSpot, which are the UK specific ones, which got set up by the National Biodiversity Network Trust, I think. And I think they're actually quite difficult to use. I don't use them, but I thought you ought to know about them. A few years ago, the Marine Conservation Society set up a seaweed recording scheme, and it'd been running for a while and they weren't getting an awful lot out of it, and the guy in charge of it phoned me up and said, you put some stuff on our site. He said, tell me how long it takes. So I got one of my pictures of a jellyfish, went onto the MCS site. 20 minutes later I recorded it. I went on to iRecord. 10 minutes later I recorded it. I went on to iNaturalist, and 2 minutes later I recorded it. So that told me something about it, and they don't do it anymore. So iRecord is where you record things that you know what they are. iSpot is for where you record things that you don't know what they are. So you put that on there, you answer a whole load of questions, and with any luck it will automatically come up with an answer, or other people will try and tell you what it is. Now if you go to iNaturalist, you get all that all in one. This is American. Don't think the worst of it, because it's American. It's very sort of social media-ish, which I must admit put me off when I first did it, because I hadn't even tried Facebook then. But it actually works really well. And these days they've got a link through iNaturalist UK straight into the National Biodiversity Network. So if you record stuff on iNaturalist, it's going into the national record, which means that it will go into the county records as well. Because you find quite a number of these egos and logos and grants recording schemes that are sort of very local, and it just gets kept local and no one else gets to see the data. Waste of time, in my view. Once an observation has become research grade, which means that 2 people who supposedly know what they're doing have agreed that that's what it is, then it goes on to the record. That has its weaknesses, and we'll come on to that in a minute. You know, if you've got a wrong ID there. But you can do all sorts of things with it, which are really quite easy. This is the Wembury Marine Conservation Area project, which I set up, and I'm not a great tech guru. I managed to work out from their instructions how to do it. You draw a series of dots all the way around the limit of the marine conservation area, and every observation that's made in there goes on there. So if you want to know what people are seeing, go onto the project and you'll see. It's not 100% because it's just the things that go into iRecord, but it's a very easy way of seeing it. And of course, if you look at one of the things on there is you can have a look at all the species, and the most popular species, which is not necessarily the commonest species, is the shanny, because they're ever so photogenic and they're ever so easy to take pictures of. And you go snorkeling and this little thing sits on a rock and says, take my picture, doesn't it? And you put your finger out and it doesn't run away, it comes over and has a look at it. So everyone's got pictures of so there is a picture of a chiton. You all know chitons? This thing here is like a limpet, only it's flexible. And I took that on the 29th of May in 2022 during a Rockpool ramble. Whacked it on iRecord. Someone else said, "Yeah, that's a chiton." Research grade straight off, not a problem. About 3 or 4 days later, we were having another Rockpool ramble, exactly the same position, hidden in the bottom of a crevice instead of out on the open as it was last time, was my chiton again. And I happened to be talking to a bunch of kids and showed them another chiton. They said, "Wow, that's so cool, isn't it? Isn't that amazing? Do you want to see another one?" Yeah. So I showed them round to the outside. Down that little hole in the rock there's another chiton. "Oh yes, that's fantastic." So I took a picture of it and stuck it on iRecord. Unfortunately, that is not a chiton. Someone else agreed with me that it was a chiton, so bingo, it went off as research grade. Bingo, it went onto the iRecord records, which meant it was going to be official. But Warren Maguire, who is the marine isopods and social media specialist from the British Myriapod and Isopod group, these things exist, believe me, spotted this and said, "That's not a chiton, that's an isopod." Isopods are things like woodlice. They're flattened that way, legs down the side. And he took my picture and said, "Look, he's got all these legs. Those aren't bristles, those are legs, and those are its segments. And there's a lot more than if it was a chiton. That's an isopod." I said, "Oh, sorry, I'll try not to do that again." We actually correspond quite cordially these days. I can go and say, "I found an isopod, can you tell me what it is?" So we're in quite good terms now. One of the other things about it is that it is international. And that, for you plant lovers, is a sheep's bit, sort of scabious. And I found that at Wembury Point. And it got picked up by Miguel, a researcher in Spain, who was doing a study of these things and got onto me through iRecord and said, "Do you think you can get me a specimen?" So I went and picked another one and stuck it in a jiffy bag and sent it off to Spain. And he's got his biogenetic data from there.
So, John, a few times you've said iRecord, do you mean iNaturalist?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, sorry. Read it, don't listen to me. Who knows what that is? Sea kale or cranberry. It's a big sort of floppy, beaky sort of plant. And there's a patch of it. It's supposed to be very common, but on this stretch there's only the one that I know towards Wembury Point. And in the spring, it comes up out of the shingle like something out of Alien. These bright purple priapic growths come up, and then it turns into a great mat of sort of grey-green leaves, and it has flowers on it. I think it's quite nice, really. And the fact that it just suddenly erupts out of the sand is amazing. So I've been taking pictures of that for a while and putting one on iNaturalist, and actually interesting, there was a discussion on their forum the other day about putting repeat records in to show the progress over time. And they say, yeah, that's a good idea. So I'm glad that I haven't been breaching any unwritten code. And that got picked up by a PhD researcher in Wales, who said, can you send me some samples of that? And because we was doing a genetic study of sea kale. So I've been taking all these pictures of the bed where it is, but also of the bank itself. And there is my own time lapse of it. So I can sympathise with the fact that you've got problems with people not. I mean, how can they not get a picture straight on with your device? I have to climb halfway up a sandy bank and try and hold the camera there and don't get a blade of grass in it and don't fall down. And I'm wondering whether I can sort of doctor them or not. But you can see the way that the bed comes out, grows like something out of a science fiction movie. Oops. Right, the Devon Wildlife Trust Marine Stranding Network, which is part of the National Marine Stranding Network. That's the place to go if you find a dead animal on the beach, seal, dolphin, that sort of thing. And if you want to join it, talk to Coral in the Marine Centre, because she's the coordinator for Devon. So I've been doing that for about 10 years now. You do a course, get shown what measurements to take, how to take them, all the health and safety, because these things carry some really nasty diseases. So you have to go down there armed with lots of plastic gloves. And the technique is put on 3 pairs. So you then do things that you're not going to touch them with, put it down, do all the nasty touching stuff, and then you've still got to take some more pictures. So you take off the outer layer of gloves, pick up your camera again, take some more, do it more, until eventually you've run out of gloves. And you'll see these yellow tags. Well, I don't know when they're still going to be yellow, because we've run out of those now. If they're not dead, they get handled by the British Divers Marine Life Rescue people, that's not something I've done, because it looks really quite dangerous to me. But they do a fantastic job with getting animals back into the water after they've stranded, or in this case where they've been caught up in fishing gear. Orca, that's a charity that it gets you to engage with whales and dolphins. They do a basic, for a mere £15, dolphin and whale recognition days course, which is good. If you pass that, you can then go out and go off on some of the trips that take people to do observations. So I did one with them in 2013, going from Penzance to the Scillies, which was sort of in October. It was fairly bouncy. But we did see some dolphins down there. In fact, I spotted those because although I was looking out from the bridge, I'd worked out that actually the best place to look was at all the other people on deck. Because as soon as they saw a dolphin, as soon as one person saw the dolphin, they all went and looked at it. So all I had to do was watch them, and when they all swung around in that direction, there was the dolphins. Power of crowds. The Great Egg Case Hunt, this is run by the Shark Trust. And do you know about egg cases? Everyone know Murmur's Percy's? And that's the sort of thing that you might find up on the beach, all dried out and crinkly. But if you soak them in water, they come out more like that, and you need to get them like that before you can measure them and submit them on their website. And there's a really good ID guide on there which takes you through a sort of key system to get you down to. So does anyone know what that sort of egg case is from?
Catch-up?
Yeah? What sort of catch-up?
Good one.
Yeah, bigger than that one. Yes, that's what used to be called a lesser spotted dogfish. Is it still called a lesser spotted dogfish?
Small spotted catcher.
Small spotted, yes. And this one is the bull huss or nurse hound. In fact, I rehydrated that this evening, and it was a little shrinkled thing, not much bigger than that. Before that.
John, can I just say about the flapper skate egg cases
Yes.
I've just got hold of?
Yes.
Because just corresponding with this lady in the Orkneys who's got collected a lot of these big, used to be called common skate, now called flapper skate egg cases, and they're about that size. They're incredible. She sent me a load, and we used to have more, and they are these skate up to sort of 3 metres across. And if you go back to the records before mechanised fishing, there were more common flapper skate caught in Plymouth Sound than Thornback Rays. They were just everywhere, and that's what industrial fishing has done.
Yeah.
They're now virtually extinct from all around the UK. These enormous, incredible animals, and so
Yeah.
we need to get them back. Sorry, I just got. I should have bought. I didn't think about bringing them tonight, but they're sort of best part when they're
Yeah.
hydrated, best part the size of an A4 piece of paper. Thanks, John.
Yeah, so that's been going on since 2003. And I think I've got I'm in the first 10 of people who actually recorded anything, because I had to know that they were doing it and said, yeah, I'll go out and find one for you. Or if you don't want to join any of these other schemes, you can set up your own citizen science project. This is my nurse hound egg cases survey. If you go down to Wembury Point, you might have noticed, probably haven't, there's at low water, there's a little gully between two offline rocks and the main shore. And in there, nurse hounds lay their egg cases. And have been doing so for more than 100 years, because there's an article published from someone in the NBA saying, as is well known, and that was in 1920, it's a well-known place for egg cases. So I've been snorkeling down there, ideally once in each spring tide session, when the water goes down low enough to be able to reach them by hand, and put tags on them and keep a record of them to find out how long they have to take to hatch, when they're laid, how many of them hatch, that sort of thing. And that's the first one that I put a tag on in 2014, and that's the gully itself. And that's the last one I recorded last week. And the results show that they are laid all year round. The sort of conventional wisdom is that they're laid mostly in the summer, and they are mostly in the summer. But last week I found 7 that were newly laid, and that was, since November. About 50% of them I know hatch, because I've found them hatched. Of the other 50%, some of them probably hatched before they just disappeared. But actually, if you're an animal and you're just laying eggs in the hope that they're going to hatch, 50% is actually quite a good rate, isn't it? Because they're attached them to a particular sort of seaweed which really, really does hang on. They're still there after all these storms that we've had for the last 3 months. And so they're there. They don't really get predated. I've found, I think, 3 in nearly 10 years that's definitely been predated. I mean, it may be that of the other 50% we haven't seen, that's because something has had them, but we don't know what's happened to those. And I've not been able to do any maths that shows that there's a link between the temperature and the length of time it takes to hatch, which varies a lot. The received wisdom is it's to do with temperature, but I can't make it do that, and other people with better mathematical skills than I have also not been able to work out how that works. There was a picture on Facebook a few years ago that someone took of one of these things coming out of the egg case, and someone said, "Wow, how did you get that?" I said, "Oh, it's dead easy. It's all down to the temperature, and you can predict when they're going to hatch." Well, I don't believe him. I think he was lucky, and he's confusing luck with skill.
Just one embryo in there, John?
Yes.
Just one.
Yeah.
How many does each nurse have?
2 at a time. But she can hold on to a couple of dozen or so inside that are all fertilised, and then she just lays them over a period.
I'm just thinking if 50% survive and they're laying, they think that, frogs are in thousands, don't they? Most of them get eaten, but they've got pretty good survival rate.
Yeah.
Does that mean
Yeah.
the population is quite healthy?
It could do round here. Italian studies have shown that there's someone been doing something fairly similar in Naples. It's the only one I've heard of, and they say that the number of egg cases just crashed in 10 years. They started off finding up to 100 in an area, and now they're finding 1s and 2s.
And once they emerge, is their survival rate pretty good, or are there things predating on them and their little...
Well, they come out of the egg. The nurse hounds are about that big when they come out of the egg case. Because you've seen the egg case, and it's sort of that big. Inside the egg case, they're bent double. And as they're getting ready to hatch, the top end of the egg case sort of opens up. It's still pushed together like that, but if you can squeeze those bits together there, it opens up like that, and you can look inside and see this thing looking out at you. My conscience troubles me every time I do it, but I don't think it seems to hurt them, because they certainly go ahead and hatch quite happily afterwards. And so when it comes out, it has to push its nose out through that bit there, and then wriggle like hell to get itself to go the complete 180 to come out of there. And they are knackered at the end of it. I mean, I've seen, I think, 3 hatch, and one of them actually hatched out onto the rock because it was a very low tide, and it just lay there on the rock going, "I'm so tired." And so we breached the first protocol, Jim, and picked it up and put it in the water on the grounds that it was conceivable that it was the fact that we'd just been taking records of it that had sort of sparked it hatching at a time when it shouldn't have hatched, when there wasn't any water around it. So as it was our fault, it was okay for us to put it in there and deprive a seagull of his dinner. I don't know whether that was right or wrong, but at the time, that's what you do, isn't it?
Yeah, so the small spotted cat sharks get eaten by sea anemones, apparently.
Yeah.
Or apparently in the marine aquarium, they were losing their baby cat sharks that were hatching out, and found out that the snake rocks anemones were snaffling them at night when
Well,
they
they
were
just can't
wandering around.
generate some because they're quite rough. And
Yeah.
like you say, they're born quite big. It's not like the little fish fry that you see.
Yeah. But apparently, as soon as they've got over that, oh, yeah, I'm knackered, they're off hunting baby crabs and things.
I think gulls do take up quite
Yeah.
a lot, because gulls, you see them swallowing whole shore crabs.
There's quite a lot of
So
sharks, aren't there, around here? They're swimming underneath, aren't they?
yes, they'll. Yeah.
There was a David Attenborough documentary some years ago set in South Africa, which showed baboons coming down at low water springs, and they were just coming down, pulling the egg cases off, big snarly teeth, and eating the insides.
Yeah.
I've seen 2 egg cases here, which were just cut straight across. Sort of there. Now, I've not seen baboons coming down from Wembury Point. I wonder whether it's otters. Because I think if you're going to do that, you've got to be able to hold the bottom. Because if all you're going to do is take your teeth to it and go, "Ah," you're going to rip it off its substrate, aren't you? So a seal that could easily do that, but seals aren't actually dexterous, are they? Whereas otters are. So I like the idea of a otter scampering down over the rocks, holding on to it and just going, oh. Why did he only take one? I don't know. And actually, there's been sort of side effects from that. I've a couple of students from the university have used the project for their dissertations, and the first one, Tegan, without any support from the university whatsoever, then put her project into the P1 Foundation. It's the Powerboat Racing Greenwash scheme. They run a competition for students' research projects, and she got a runner-up award. So she went up to London to get it at the same time as Imogen Napper of microplastics fame. Got her prize, and she said she was the only undergraduate that got a prize at this thing. So that was quite a nice thing to have done. Illegal fishing. So this isn't really citizen science, but it's something that you as a citizen can do that helps the marine environment. If you're walking along there, and somewhere about there, in this not particularly good picture, is a netter pulling in his nets just offshore in the bay. Fortunately, I met a friend who was bird watching at the same time, and he'd spotted this, and with his whopping great bird watching camera, you could see the boat, you could see the net, you could see the cormorants that were caught in the net, and of course we could take a picture of the boat's number as well. So we both reported this to the Devon and Severn Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, Devon and Severn IFCA, and they investigated it and found the boat, prosecuted it, and he got fined about £5,000. So it works. If you're, and they're happy to get reports.
They really rely on it.
When we were doing our dolphin watching the other weekend, there was this trawler just trawling around in there, and I wondered whether it was okay, so I sent them a picture with a rough idea of where it was, because I had a look on marine traffic. Have you come across marine traffic app on the phone? It picks up the automatic identification signals that ships put out and puts them on a map. So you're walking along the beach and there's a ship. What's that then? And I'll tell you what it is. And it wasn't on there, which suggested to me that it hadn't got its AIS on. If it hadn't got its AIS on, maybe it wasn't doing things entirely legally. But they worked out from the timing and where it was, because it was keeping its the automatic system that the fishermen are required to do. They worked out what it was, where it was, and in fact it was there, which is outside of that prohibited area and outside of that prohibited area. So he was actually legal. But again, they were very happy to get a report and said, do it. And that's the place to do it.
So is illegal fishing from the shore, it's like illegal, isn't it? Illegal fishing with corrects? Is it just...
Well, they're probably angling.
So
I mean, they'll still be subject to the same landing limits on, say, bass as any other recreational fisherman.
But it's not actually legal within that zone?
No.
No, I mean it's a voluntary. There's
Yeah.
a voluntary code of conduct in the conservation area. We ask
But this-
people not to
Sometimes you see
remove.
people coming out.
But this area here,
Yeah, and again, it's unfortunately it's only voluntary.
What, even spearfishing?
Yes, we ask people not to spearfish in the conservation area, and that's, I mean, not just us, that's the code of conduct with support from the Wildlife Trust, the County Council and everything. Ask people not to spearfish, but it isn't actually illegal.
but this area here, you're not allowed to use, you're not allowed to trawl in there. But you could set a fixed net so long as at every state of the tide its top is at least 3 metres below the surface.
Which is very difficult to do on these reefs here. So if you see people putting in a fixed net anywhere near the shore, it's very likely to be illegal. So that's definitely worth
Yeah,
photographing.
yeah.
sending
But all these
people.
potters that you see round here, they're probably legal, assuming that they've got a permit. And even if you're a recreational potter, you've got to have a permit, and that limits you to the number of pots that you can put down. So, any questions? How are we doing for time? We're doing all right. No? Right. Yes.
For the sea-watch Saturday, what kind of timings do you have?
Oh, early.
Mm.
Yeah. Yes, about sort of 7:30, something like that, I think. Yeah, on a day like that, it's lots of fun. But actually, if it's all grey and horrible, you're not going to see anything anyway. So you can feel your conscience is clear if you don't go when it's horrible. But and Paul Burley's worth listening to. Anyway, he's got a fund of stories about seeing dolphins and things. And you'll learn how to do it, so you can just go and do it any time when there's a nice day. Use a telescope and go and stand on Wembury Point and look at dolphins.
They tend to be way off the new stone, or are they actually in quite village?
We were seeing them about a kilometre beyond the Mewstone. That's what Paul said the distance was. So it's not that far off. But any further than that, it's really got to be very flat to see them. And the technique is you look for the birds, and where the birds are feeding, then you're likely to see the dolphins feeding underneath. And then you might see the tuna as well. I might see tuna here.
People have done that, haven't they?
Oh yeah,
In
yeah.
Plymouth-
Paul's seen lots.
In Plymouth Sound.
Yeah,
Probably some dolphins in the same.
Yeah. Something sharks.
You see for a tuna then, you see their fin.
they come out of the water.
Oh, actually jumping.
Oh yeah, 8 foot of 1,000 pounds of fish out of the water. I've seen it in the Indian Ocean at a great distance. I mean, so it gives you an idea of just how big this thing is. It was probably a couple of miles away. You can see this thing doing it. Wow. Yeah, I'd like to see it.